Serious, travelers of Reddit, what are some of the creepiest, scariest experiences you've had abroad? I went to visit Ukraine with my parents because they wanted to see the small villages where their parents were born. We have no family in the area, so we hired a guide to take us around since the country can be a bit corrupt. As we were driving around on a highway, we suddenly were stopped in traffic, literally middle of nowhere. The guide gets out of the car and takes a look, then quickly jumps back into the car, does a U-turn and drives off, telling my mom we can't go to her mom's village. We ask why and he says that was some kind of Russian militant roadblock. This was during the whole Crimea thing. Met a guy in Munich on the street who had lived in the same house as I did, in Cincinnati, 40 years ago. Got my phone pickpocketed on the subway in New Delhi. I was able to grab one of the thieves. He didn't have my phone. A mob of random commuters beat the living frick out of him at the next stop. The police arrived and continued to beat the crap out of him with cricket bats. We took him to the police station. Told him to call his friend who had the phone. Friend wouldn't come. Police closed the door to their office with the thief and I just hear screams. I wait and wait. Police officer brings the kid into my room with a black plastic bag. Throws the kid on the dirt ground. Opens the bag. Pulls out my phone from a bag of curry. He throws the curry on the ground and makes the kid eat it. He even gave him a spoon. Got my phone back though. 1992, I was walking up the stairs to the ticket booths in the Warsaw, Poland Central train station. All of a sudden this dude is falling down the stairs, coming to rest a few stairs above where I was standing. Dude had a long screwdriver sticking out of his abdomen. I had a pack of wild dogs chase me from my bus stop to my hotel at 3 AM in Kosovo. I also had an old woman yell at me in Russian about not making my bed right on the train and then watched over my shoulder till it was to her satisfaction when I was on my way back to Bucharest from Moldova. I was traveling in Nicaragua several years ago when I got lost and ended up having to take a taxi at 9:30 PM back to my hostel. When the taxi pulled up to the curb, the taxi driver locked the taxi doors and told me that I had misunderstood the fare. He claimed I owed him $100, which was several times more than we had agreed upon. I tried to pry the doors open from the inside but was completely trapped. Thankfully, he let me out of the taxi after taking all the money I had on me. The hostel workers told me I was incredibly lucky. A few days earlier, a taxi driver had kidnapped another young female, assaulted her, then dumped her barely conscious body in a field outside town thinking that she was dead. A few local school children found her on their way to school in the morning. On the red-eye train, stopped for a layover in New York, my friend and I are half asleep, sitting across from each other. A homeless guy snuck into the train, pulled his pants and underwear down and tried to sit with my friend, encouraging her to help him out. I woke up just in time to see it happen. Took me yelling at the guy to find another place to sit for him to hurriedly pull his pants up and move somewhere else, only to try the same thing to another woman, who was extremely vocal about it. The cops spoke with us. Apparently this guy was known for stealing cans from the subways and this was a new MO for the guy. In 2016 I went to Brussels in a school trip. We were at the train station and we left to Germany, I believe. Several hours later all of our moms just start calling and texting us asking where we were and stuff. Turns out there was a bombing in the train station. It's crazy to believe that the bombs were probably already planted when we were there. I was stalked by a guy while walking through the Tiergarten in Berlin. I was walking a path, enjoying the park alone. I saw this guy standing on the edge of the walkway just looking off into the distance. I passed him and when I was about 20 feet away, he turned and followed after me, keeping pace. I started to take a very meandering path, even leaving the park and entering again. The guy stuck with me the whole way. Eventually I got to a place with some sharp turns and heavy greenery. I was able to lose the line of sight and put myself up against a corner. I'd just been in Switzerland and had bought a pocket knife, so I opened the blade and held it inside my jacket pocket. I stood there, waiting, and then this guy comes walking out of the path confused and obviously trying to see where I went. When he finally spotted me, he jolted and since I had the drop on him, he played it cool and continued walking as if he hadn't followed me there. He stopped a little ways ahead, and I kept watching him. I wanted to confront him to find out why he'd followed me, but since I was a visitor in the country, I thought better of it. Instead, I waited until I saw a big group of people leaving and fell in with them. He started to follow me, but I finally lost him outside the garden. It unsettled me because to this day I have no idea why he was following me. I'm a guy and at the time I was in my early 20s, pretty fit, and had a sour disposition, so I didn't seem like a prime mugging target, but maybe he thought otherwise. Was on a flight once going into Orlando that hit some unexpected turbulence. This was no ordinary turbulence. We went from 0 to 100 in an instant. People literally flew out of their seats. Luggage fell from the overhead bins. People screamed like they were going to die. There were several sudden drops in elevation strong enough that people's arms flew up in the air and my butt came out of the seat. I've flown quite a bit and sometimes it gets bumpy. This was the first time I seriously thought something bad was going to happen. I was staying in a weird hostel by myself in Barcelona. Woke up to a man staring at me while I slept. He was looking over one of those wood dividing screens that the shared room had. I pretend to still be asleep because I was afraid of what he would do if I moved or confronted him and I didn't know if there was anyone else in the room. He stared for like 2 hours until finally my alarm rang cause I had to take an early train. So I put all my stuff in my bag and left the room. As I left I told the owner, but I was really in a hurry and didn't ask what he was going to do with the guy. Hiking in Huaraz, Peru, has been told to watch our gear as locals, and apparently foxes might make off with items left around the campsite, so we made sure to clean the campsite extra well, packing all our gear in the tent and inside the fly, and after a long day hiking, off to bed. Middle of the night our tent starts shaking like crazy. I wake up freaking out thinking we were getting robbed. I started yelling and screaming. Part of the tent pushes in real far. I managed to get outside to start swinging and come face to face with the cow that had wandered into the tent ropes and got startled. Pretty lucky that it didn't step down into the tent and hit us. A friend and I were waiting for a night train in Naples and after someone tried to steal our bags decided to go everywhere together. It was a good thing because a man who had been whistling at us for an hour tried to follow us into the bathroom. I was walking around in a town in Algeria. I wandered into a neighborhood and noticed there were hardly any people out. A little further and there were literally no people out. I started to feel a little uneasy and then I see an extremely tall man walking towards me. Straight towards me, obviously with intent. He gets closer, and I see an older gentleman with a long grey beard and wearing a grey tunic. I stop. He comes right up to me and says, in pretty good English, "You're not safe here. We need to get you off the street." I say okay, and he says follow me. We walk a few blocks and we come to a door. He says wait here a minute, and he goes inside. He opens the door again and invites me in. When I get inside, there are maybe a dozen men. They are all dressed in black, and they are staring absolute daggers at me. Greybeard lays into them, starts shaking his fists at them, gets really worked up. Then one of the younger guys goes into the kitchen and brings out some tea and cookies, and offers them to me. So, I'm drinking tea, and trying to smile, and one of the young guys asks where I'm from and I say the States and he starts talking about the CIA and stuff. And then I say you think the CIA is bad here? Let me tell you about Central America. And then pretty soon everybody is warming up to me and we're laughing and talking crap about American foreign policy and drinking tea. After a bit of that the older man invites me back to his apartment. He has a huge library. I gift him a book that I had finished. And then he tells me what had just happened. His little brother, who was one of the younger men, was the leader of a radical group. All the other men I had met, he had overheard them getting ready to kidnap me, but he had shamed them for not being good hosts, and for disrespecting him because it was his house. He said that I would be safe from then on. A good friend of mine in Zimbabwe was grabbed at gunpoint and forced into a van. Thankfully they only took her to an ATM and made her drain her account than they left her somewhere outside town. Could have been so much worse. In India our bus rounded a corner in the mountains and another bus was on the other side of the curve. Both buses skid to a stop about 1 foot from one another. Both drivers started laughing and poking fun at each other. We saw a bus from the 80s that fell down the mountain about 15 minutes later. How intense. When I was a kid, my dad used to lead groups of college kids to Central and South America to build houses. One year he decided that we should ride the chicken bus from Guatemala City to Mexico City. Long trip. We got to the border and a soldier with a heck of a big machine gun got on the bus and looked around. Saw that we had about 15 college girls on the bus, and then went and talked to someone on the phone. About 2 minutes later, a bunch of guys with machine guns got on the bus and informed us that all the males had to get off the bus and line up in front of it. I remember that we did it, but there was a heck of a lot of tension in the air as we did. Soldiers crammed into the bus. We waited. Finally, they got off the bus and we got back on and away we went. It was a whole lot of nothing, really, but I remember my dad, the leader of the group, looking very pale and sweating bullets. I was working at the Sochi Olympics and saw a pack of stray dogs chase and take down one of our team's translators before people scared them away. That was an eye-opener. Visiting Chicago from Seattle for a week, I booked an Airbnb with a gentleman understanding that I would be in a household with maybe 5 other people as he did bunk beds in the room. The Airbnb was marketed as close to trains, decent area, and the house looked clean with many useful amenities. Upon arriving at the house, I find that it's run down, unclean, with only the sheets being changed by the maid. On top of that, many appliances were broken and there was no potable water. That was the first strike. Next, there were upwards of 15 people staying in the house. That bunk bed situation, he had 5-6 rooms with varying amounts of bunk beds squeezed in and no room to walk. No one in the house knew about the other rooms from the listing. I dropped my things off to explore the city and noticed the neighborhood was a bit sketchy but thought nothing of it. When I came back there was one of the other guests sitting waiting for an Uber Eats because he was too terrified to walk down the street and get food. Apparently, the night before I arrived, 3 people in the house were mugged while walking 5 minutes from the train to the house. That night, 8 of us sat on the floor of the living room. Seemed like a small dining area but a lover's couch was placed in there with a broken TV, and heard 2 separate occasions of 8-10 gunshots a block away. I immediately moved to a hostel and argued with Airbnb and himself until I received a refund. Mike, screw you. I witnessed a creepy old man groping a teenager on a crowded train in Osaka. The girl was just enduring it and you can tell that she was holding back her tears. I whipped my phone out and started filming the guy, which made him use his other hand, which was blocked from my view, so I asked my guy friend to switch places with a girl. After that, on the next stop, the creepy guy got off. I asked the girl if she was okay. She thanked us and her friends also expressed their gratitude. I think all of them, all teenage girls, were aware of the groping, but I read somewhere that it is not the Japanese culture to make a scene. I was aware that this kind of thing was prevalent in Japan, but I'm still shocked to see it in person. That creepy man and the poor girl's face will be forever etched in my mind. A cult behind several murders in China tried to recruit me for some reason. Maybe you have a real serial killer vibe. I was traveling by van through the mountains in the Philippines with a friend that is a really big guy. We came up on a checkpoint with soldiers searching cars. The guys were all wearing mismatched clothes and did not have any insignias on their uniforms or trucks. They searched all of our bags and we're asking questions of the driver in Tagalog, which we did not speak. We heard them say American and we were the only 2 Americans on the bus. They talked for a little while and finally waved us through. Later we told the story to another American and he said we had gone through a guerrilla controlled area where Americans had been kidnapped for ransom lately. They all agreed they did not take us because of the size of my friend. I think we got really lucky that day. 17-year-old me was in a public restroom near the Colosseum in Rome. I was taking a leak at a urinal when some dude rushed into the urinal right next to me, looked over the partition at my junk and he started jerking off extremely violently. I had just started and had to go something fierce, so I was trying to cover up, avoid jerking off, and not get pee all over myself. Suddenly the Roma police came bustling in and grab old boy and start yelling at me in Italian very loudly. As I zip up and throw my hands in the air, I simply say English and American. They demanded to see my passport and then hauled off. Jerk off guy. 0/10 not a good experience. Guy in Aruba tried to kidnap or pay me, I think. I'm a single female and found a crazy cheap ticket out there. Decided to use it as a chance to get my advanced diver certificate. Anyway, I went on a horse riding trip where the tour picked up a group in a minivan. On the way back, the driver skipped my stop and dropped off the last riders at their hotel. After a moment of confusion, I was unsure of my surroundings. It felt like this was wrong. I asked why we drove past my place. The driver said, "Oh, I'm taking a different way." And I said, "That really doesn't make sense. The traffic is fine. It's more direct this way. Can we just go back?" He was quiet and kept driving, and now my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He said, "There's a really great beach down this way. Not many tourists." At this point he was driving through the backside of a shopping complex. Nobody in sight. Dusk, and I was considering if I should try to jump out of a moving vehicle. But because I'd get stranded in an empty parking lot, it'd be all too easy for him to grab me again. Instead I said, "I can't. There are people waiting for me." I just texted them saying I'm in the car on the way home and will be there in a few minutes. I'll be late if we don't go back now. Somehow that worked. He turned the car around and his whole attitude changed. He started telling me how he had a wife and kids. My heart was thundering, but I think I sounded normal. Also, I had zero cell phone reception. The story about the text was a lie, and I had no way to phone for help if he called my bluff. Freaking scary. If that crap happens on a tour when you go in a decent sized group, I have no idea how you stay safe as a single female traveler. I have mostly traveled through Europe, and the only time I've ever really felt uncomfortable was when I was groped on the metro in Rome. We were packed into the car, and I felt a hand against my back. No big deal. I live in New York City. It happens. But then the hand slipped between me and the next person and around to near my stomach. Oh, maybe a pickpocket? Well, I had a money belt, so I was okay there. The hand grabbed my breast. We were so tightly packed that I couldn't turn around, and I just froze. I wanted to say, "Stop" or "don't" or anything at all, but in the moment every word of my Italian fled from my brain and I felt like a bucket of scalding water had been dumped over my head. The ride felt like it lasted forever. At the next stop I forced my way out of the car and out into the fresh air. Rome is so beautiful, but it felt pretty dang ugly that day. The first day in the Philippines when I landed in Manila, a white Canadian tourist was beheaded by people who align with us, so there was that. You have been visited by the Wisdom Papa. Type "study well Papa" or you will fail your next test at school. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.